And I suggested this, that we would start small with the yearbooks and pictures and things like that, but I said, I'll need a room. He said, we'll give you one out in Bradford Woods. So we started out in Bradford Woods, and before you know it, it got so big I had no more room in this small area, because I was sort of like a gatherer thing. People would say, well, I have an old radio. How about taking it, Joe, before I destroy it? I'd take an old radio and this and that. And so the result was, we had this with Bernie Colburn sub out there. And finally they gave me a room at Ingomar Elementary School. And I was there for 2 years. Well, fate would have it that we run out of rooms for me to do it. Okay, so then we went over to Ingomar Middle. I moved basically 7 times with this whole collection.
Wow.
And it was just, I don't know how to put it into words. So finally, they gave me supposedly a permanent site, and that was at McKnight Elementary School. However, nothing is permanent except death and taxes. So the result was they came to me and said, Joe, we need this area because we're thinking of closing People's School, and we think we're going to need this area, and we hate to tell you, but you're going to have to leave. So if you can imagine this whole, all the stuff, where was I going to put it?
That's what I told my son-in-law. I said,
And that's rare that a bus driver in his 50s, or I think late 40s, would still have kept his pedal car, which is pretty neat. I never knew my father, and it bothered me because I wanted to know who he was. My natural mother died when she was 30. Sort of a sad story to a degree. When she had me during the Depression, she couldn't keep me. And she was in the Zor home, if you remember the home, for 2 years. You were able to stay there for 2 years. Then after that, you had to leave. And they suggested they put me up for adoption. As a 2-year-old, little blonde, curly hair, blue haired boy. And she said, no, I can't give him up. I'll put him in a foster home. So I was with a foster home, and I found this all out later in my life, in Greensboro. A couple had 2 children, 2 girls, and they couldn't have any more children, so they wanted a boy. So they figured they put me in a foster home, and they figured they could get me through adoption, that my mother would give me up. She wouldn't do it. So at 5 years old, and I'll remember like it just yesterday, I was standing, with a picture of me standing with my suitcase at the Orphans Court, waiting for Harry Fitzpatrick and Ernie Sarver to pick me up, to bring me to my new home. And in those days, 19 was the main artery from Pittsburgh to our area. They had a little Chevy car, and it had a rumble seat in it. And I asked what that was, and they said, it's a rumble seat. I said, can I ride in that? And they said, yes, you can. So they drove me out in that little rumble seat. And when I got out, the first thing I seen was a horse. I had never seen a horse as a young kid. And the horse comes up out of in the corral, and her name was Becky, and I petted her. So I lived there for 5 years, went to Ingomar Elementary School. At the age of 10, in 1941, October the 15th, my mother married. And she was married on October the 29th. She finally had her son. And we moved to Pittsburgh at Peralta Street off of Chestnut Street. She was cooking her first Thanksgiving dinner for her stepmother and my grandmother. And she became ill. 2 days later, she died. Only married 6 weeks. Now, the interesting thing is why I always admired George Bullick. My name was Evans at that time. Here's a man standing 6'2", good-looking guy. with a 10-year-old kid, no wife, half the wedding gifts not even open. I can imagine the trauma that had to go through that man at that time. What do I do with this kid? So all the aunts, they had a meeting, and they asked one of the aunts if one of them would take me. And they all turned him down. No room, boom, boom, boom. Put him up for adoption, George. The people who saved me indirectly was Harry and Catherine Fitzpatrick. They came to view the body, and they asked George if they could adopt me. And he said no. They said, well, we need some financial help. We love Joe. Why don't you both move in with us? And we did. We gave all the wedding gifts back. The only thing we left there, we gave the stove to my grandmother. We brought the refrigerator to Fitzpatrick. And the only thing we walked out of there with was with 2 suitcases and a cedar chest. And we went to the Fitzpatricks, and she raised me. And people gave me. This was a majorette, and the girl who was a majorette at North Allegheny School District gave me that. This here was a very close friend of mine who was in her late 80s. And she said, Joe, I have a priceless baby doll, and I don't know of anybody I know that would keep it secure in your museum, and I'd love you to have it. So that's the baby doll there, and it actually had the box that it came in. Then we had wind-up toys, and if you remember the viewfinder, that you looked at things. How many girls roller skated when you were
yeah, we all did. Yep. I grew up where there were sidewalks, so we all did.
Yeah, I did a lot of roller skating myself. And this here is a questionable thing, but it was told to me that it was for flying a kite. I did one funny thing. I had a dollar bill, and I held it up in the air, and I said, kids, this is a dollar bill. Now, when I was 14 years old, I was allowed to do this, 4 of us. We were allowed to go to Forbes Field on a Saturday to see a ball game. Now, to do that, we had to thumb to Westfield and get on a streetcar. And you got 3 tokens for $0.25. Well, we only bought 1 token for 10 cents to get to Pittsburgh, and then a transfer took us to Oakland. 50 cents to get into the ball game. Mom packed me 2 peanut butter jelly sandwiches, and I had an orange, and an apple, and a Clark candy bar. And then I would buy a nickel Coke. Now I said, you kids keeping track of this? Oh, yeah. So then I put my dime in and come back to Westview. And then I would go to Isley's and get that nice big ice cream cone. And I would thumb back home with a nickel in my pocket.